Hello YouTube. I'm going to be doing a bit of a different video today. I am going to talk about why I despise LFD, why I loathe LFD. I'm just kidding, I don't actually hate LFD. It's just I mean, there's some good things about LFD, there's some bad things, mostly bad things in my opinion. It's kind of like marriage if you really think about it. Am I right, lads? Now, I might get a lot of heat for making this video, but remember at the end of the day it's just my opinion. So if you disagree with my opinion, feel free to drop a dislike on this video and tell me to go fuck myself. Now to start off, let's first look at the positives and negatives of LFD. So obviously the first benefit of LFD that everybody knows about and loves so much is that it's hella easy to get into the group. You literally just press the button and you wait for the queue to pop and then you press the button again and you get in the group. Yay! I get it. I get it. I do. It's nice. Just be able to press a button and get into a group automatically. It's very convenient. It's also very accessible, so you could be the worst player in the world, you could not speak English, you could not have a keyboard, you could still be a virgin, it doesn't matter. As long as you can press the button, you can get into a group. Now that might explain why the quality of players in LFD seems to be worse than the quality of players without LFD. You would think they'd be the same, but nope. It turns out that that little bit of human interaction and reading that you have to do, opening up LFG bulletin board, reading the lines, trying to find a group that you want to join, and then messaging that person for an invite, it turns out that process does make some difference in the quality of the players that you end up grouping with, on average. So that's the thing. Anyways, that is where the good aspects of LFD end. So now let's talk about the bad. So the biggest issue that I see with LFD is that people leave after one wipe rather than trying to communicate and improve as a group. So why does that happen? Well, I'll tell you why. The reason people do it is because it is the path of least resistance. Everyone in life tends to take the path of least resistance in everything that they do because that's just the way that humans are, okay? People aren't really going to make things harder on themselves for no reason. Well, as it turns out, when LFD is in the game, players find that it's easier to simply leave the group if the group wipes, eat the deserter debuff, then queue up again at another time and pray for a better group. That tends to be what people do, and that is a big problem because communication, the community aspect of the game goes right out the window, which is bad for an MMO. Do you know why it's bad? It's because MMOs are kind of like Yu-Gi-Oh! Have you guys seen Yu-Gi-Oh! Before? Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not about the cards. It's not about the dueling, okay? It's about the time we spend with each other and the friendships we make along the way. Isn't that so fucking cute, guys? Oh, it's so cute, but it's true. Like, community is one of the pillars, as Blizzard likes to put it, that should be maintained as much as possible. Like, the game should not be designed to disincentivize communication with other players, or else the game's just going to end up like retail. On retail, 95% of the content that you do, communicating with other players is either unnecessary or it just makes your life harder. It's better to literally just play the content as if it's a single player game, which is why it feels like the community on retail is dead, because the only time you need to talk to other players is in raids in high-end Mythic Plus. Now the second problem with LFD is that you can't make the dungeons difficult because most groups won't be able to clear through the content with LFD. This was a big problem at the beginning of Cataclysm. In Wrath, when they implemented LFD, it wasn't actually that bad because like the dungeons were really easy and players were so geared by that point that you could literally queue up with any random retard and steamroll the dungeon easily enough. But in Kata, they implemented hard dungeons, and players were so fucking mad that they couldn't clear the dungeons with LFD. Like, I used to read the WoW forums every single day back then, and people were so fucking triggered, you have no idea. Like, I couldn't even believe it. And in my opinion, Cataclysm dungeons were tuned perfectly. Like, the trash might have been a little bit too difficult in some instances, but besides that, I thought the Cataclysm dungeons were perfect. And if they hadn't implemented LFD in Cataclysm, I think people would have really enjoyed those dungeons. But the issue was that people would leave after one wipe constantly, like I said before, rather than try to communicate and work together, and it just resulted in a miserable experience for everyone involved, unless you were lucky enough to get good groups. Now here's the thing. It is important to have difficult dungeons. Not difficult as in like TBC difficult, where you have to CC everything perfectly and slowly crawl through the dungeon. Like, that's retarded. Dungeons should never be like that. In my opinion, dungeons should be designed to be difficult enough to where the average player has to actually pay attention and press their buttons and not get hit by mechanics over and over. If you design the dungeons to be too easy, like Wrath dungeons are, then there's no sense of accomplishment for completing the dungeons. There's no incentive to actually play your class properly or to try or to go above and beyond to help out the group or to work together. And what that does is it makes the content seem disposable and meaningless, where the only purpose of the content is to give players something to do. Not something fun to do, not something interesting to do, or challenging or exciting or social to do, simply something to do. And that is basically how I would describe retail WoW. There's a lot of content on retail WoW, a lot of things to do, but only a small percentage of that content is actually meaningful or impactful or has a sense of accomplishment when you complete it. The rest of it is just disposable, mindless, single player content that's designed to keep you playing the game, but not actually enjoying the game. That is why it is important for things to be difficult and engaging, but not too difficult to the point where it's frustrating for the average player, like TBC Heroic Dungeons were. Fuck TBC Heroic Dungeons. The content just needs to be difficult enough to where you're incentivized to actually try and be focused and communicate and overcome. And the current state of LFD gets rid of all of that. And as a final downside to LFD, it encourages just AFKing in major cities and pressing menu buttons. World of Menucraft, baby. Woo! You've probably heard people say that before, like especially if you played WoD. And it's true, sitting in one place and pressing menu buttons is not good for an MMO. There should be some immersion, you know? I like some immersion in my video games. I'm not feeling very immersed if I don't have to venture out into the world of Warcraft every once in a while. And I also don't feel immersed if I don't have to communicate with other players every once in a while. And it doesn't even have to be a lot of communication. It could just be like someone saying, fucking summon me now. And I don't know, like someone else being like, how about I summon my dick in your ass, bitch? Like, it doesn't have to be that much communication. It just has to be some communication that is incentivized so that I feel like I'm actually playing with other players and not playing with like NPCs like it's fucking Guild Wars 1. So, anyways, what are the solutions to fix this? How do we fix LFD? Well, the way you fix anything, in my opinion, is to preserve the good aspects and get rid of the bad ones. So let's go over the bad things and see how we can get rid of those. So the first one is people leaving after one wipe. How do we fix that? Well, as I said before, the reason people leave after one wipe is because the path of least resistance is to leave after one wipe. So how do we make it so that the path of least resistance is to stay with the group? Well, one solution I have is actually a twofer. It helps with this issue and that issue. And that solution is to simply not have LFD port you into the dungeon. That way you have to slog your dumbass to every dungeon every time you join a group. And that is a good thing for multiple reasons. The first thing it does is it gets you communicating with your party immediately, so it's incentivizing communication. So right off the bat, you will be saying things like, we need 2 people to summon, I'll go summon guys, I can't summon because I'm busy having sex with my girl, basic conversations to get the ball rolling. It also adds some immersion into the game because you get to be out in the world and using summoning stones like booyah, like that's how the game should be. And the most important reason why it's good is because if you leave the group, then you'll have to slog your dumbass all the way back to the instance with another group. So in your mind, you're going to be like, well, I don't want to fucking do that, so I'm just going to stay with this group instead. Even better is if Blizzard did some kinky shit before each dungeon like they used to do in vanilla. Remember how in vanilla you had to summon people and then spend 15 minutes clearing the trash leading up to the dungeon before you'd actually be able to enter the dungeon and start clearing it. That kind of thing does actually go a long way into incentivizing people to stay with the group. And in my personal opinion, I thought it was pretty cool to have the pre-dungeon content that you had to do before entering the dungeon. Like I have really good memories of Sunken Temple and Black Fathom Depths and Wailing Caverns, the pre-dungeon trash for that. I always thought that stuff was really cool. So I definitely think they should bring that back. Now, with those changes, I believe that the path of least resistance would be to stay with the group most of the time, rather than just leaving it instantly after one wipe. And I know what you're saying. I know people in chat are going to be like, Mac, I have 5 kids and 8 wives, and all of my wives' boyfriends I have to take care of. I can only play WoW for 2 minutes a day. Okay, I need LFD to port me into the dungeon because I just don't have the time. And no, sorry. The game should not be designed for people who don't have time to play the game. Just straight up. But at the same time, it should not be designed for people who play the game for 16 hours a day. And the changes I'm suggesting, I don't think requires you to play the game for 16 hours a day. So we're all good. Now, going back into the getting people to stay in the group thing, I still think that people would leave after one wipe sometimes, even with the changes that I just suggested. So, I have a super fucking based idea that will practically guarantee that people will stay with the group. And this idea also makes it so that dungeons can be difficult without causing chaos in the community, like Cataclysm and low completion rates. So here's the idea. If you wipe on a boss, not on trash, on a boss, then LFD would allow your group to recruit a sixth member to the dungeon. That player would be whatever role the group votes for. So all that would happen is your group would wipe, and then the option would pop up to allow the group to vote in a second healer, a second tank, or a fourth DPS of whatever class / spec the group wants to enter the dungeon, and then you would just finish the dungeon like that. Now, what that does is it incentivizes communicating with your party to figure out which class or spec you should be recruiting, and it encourages people to stay with the group because 6 players makes things significantly easier, yet not so much easier where you don't even have to try or pay attention or work together. Isn't that a good idea? I think it's a good idea. Because with this system, the dungeons can be tuned to be relatively difficult. And if your group is truly a lost cause, then you can simply add a 6th member to your team. And if you still can't clear the dungeon with 6 players, then you're all truly, truly terrible. And you should uninstall the game and ideally uninstall your life as well, because that's just embarrassing. Like, let's be real, that's pretty embarrassing. Anyways, those 3 things are my suggestions for making LFD good. I think these things would preserve the good aspects of LFD while removing the bad aspects, and even better is if they cross-realm the whole thing like on retail. The reason I like cross-realm is because server community seems to be a thing of the past, unless you're talking about on a guild level or GDQPs or something like that, but on a non-guild level, server communities aren't really a thing anymore from what I can tell. And also low pop realms are completely mega fucked, so I think that cross-realming LFD specifically is a good idea to bring down queue times, especially in those nasty low-level dungeons that are really hard to queue for. And that's it. That's my video. Y'all can just go back to watching Asmongold's fake reaction videos. I don't know, just, you know what, go on. Get out of here.